I didn't sleep well that night. Dreams of Emma, of the warehouse, of a knife pressing against my throat, they blurred together until I couldn't tell which nightmare was which. I woke at 4 in the morning, tangled in sheets that smelled like salt and mildew, and gave up on rest. By 6, I was walking. Ravenshore wasn't big. You could cross the whole island in a few hours if you walked fast, less if you stuck to the roads. But I didn't want to stick to the roads. I wanted to remember. I started at the harbor, where the fishing boats were already heading out. Men in rubber boots and thick jackets moved through the pre-dawn dark, hauling nets and calling to each other in voices worn rough by years of wind and spray. They looked at me as I passed. Some nodded, some didn't, but no one stopped to talk. I was still an outsider here, even after 20 years away, or maybe because of it. From the harbor, I walked up Main Street. The shops were closed, their windows dark, but I remembered what they looked like in daylight. The hardware store where my father used to buy nails by the pound. The pharmacy that still had a soda counter in the back. The diner where Mrs. Chen was probably already starting the coffee, the way she had every morning since before I was born. At the end of Main Street, the road forked. Left went to the police station, to the small cluster of municipal buildings that passed for a town center. Right went up. I went right. The cliff road wound through trees that grew sideways from the wind, their branches reaching toward the mainland like they were trying to escape. The fog was thinner up here, and I could see glimpses of the water below, gray and restless, churning against rocks that had been worn smooth by centuries of tides. The houses started about halfway up. Not houses, really. Mansions. Estates. The kind of places that had names instead of addresses, with gates and hedges and long driveways that disappeared into manicured grounds. Old money lived up here, families whose names were carved into the stone of the island's history. The Partelius, the Ashfords, the Kincaids. They looked down on the harbor, on the working-class homes clustered near the water. They always had. I didn't stop at any of the gates. I just walked, letting the road carry me higher until the mansions thinned out and there was nothing but wind and rock and the occasional raven watching from a fence post. The cemetery sat at the top of the island, where the cliff dropped away to nothing. It was small. Ravenshore didn't have enough people to need a big one, but old. Some of the headstones dated back to the 1800s, names worn smooth by weather until they were barely legible. I found my family's plot near the back, under an oak tree that had somehow survived the salt wind. 3 graves in a row. My father's was the oldest. James Hartley, 1955 to 2010. He died of a heart attack in the bar on Main Street 3 years after Emma. The drinking had gotten worse after she died. Then our mother left him. Then there was nothing to get better for. My mother's grave was next to his. Margaret Hartley, 1960 to 2015. Suicide wasn't written on the headstone, but it didn't need to be. Everyone knew. She'd walked into the water one January morning and let the cold take her. I'd been in the city by then, in my 2nd year at the academy. I came back for the funeral, stood in this exact spot, and swore I'd never come back again. So much for promises. Emma's grave was the smallest. Emma Hartley, 1988 to 2006. Beloved daughter and sister. Taken too soon. Taken, such a gentle word for what had happened. Taken like she'd wandered off and gotten lost. Like someone had simply picked her up and carried her away. She'd been murdered. Stabbed and left in an alley behind the cannery that used to operate on the east side of the island. No witnesses. No weapon. No suspects that ever panned out. Just a 20-year-old girl with her whole life ahead of her, bleeding out in the dark while the rest of Ravenshore slept. I crouched down and brushed leaves off her headstone. The stone was cold under my fingers, rough with age. "I'm back," I said. "I don't know why, I don't know if it'll help anything, but I'm back." The wind answered, rustling the leaves of the oak tree. A raven called somewhere in the distance, harsh and mocking. I stayed there for a long time, watching the fog roll across the water below. Thinking about Emma at 19, at 16, at 12. Her laugh, her terrible taste in music. The way she used to braid my hair on Sunday mornings while our mother made breakfast. She should have gotten out. She was the smart one, the ambitious one. She'd been saving money for years, planning to leave for the city the moment she turned 21. Get a degree, get a job, get as far from Ravenshore as possible. Instead, she'd taken a job at some tech company, Victor Pardalou's company. I'd later learn, though I didn't know it at the time. She was going to save up faster, leave sooner. 3 months later, she was dead. I hadn't understood then. I was 8 years old, too young to grasp the permanence of it. I just knew that Emma was gone and my mother was crying and my father was drinking and nothing made sense anymore. 20 years later, it still didn't. I stood, my knees protesting the cold. The sun was fully up now, weak and pale through the overcast sky. Time to get back. Burke was probably already at the station. Pretending not to wait for me, I took one last look at Emma's headstone. "I'm going to find out what happened to you," I said. "I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what I have to dig up. Someone on this island knows the truth, and I'm going to find them." The raven called again, closer this time. I turned and walked back down the cliff road, past the mansions with their gates and their secrets, past the sideways trees and the watching birds. The fog was thickening again, swallowing the world in gray. But I could see clearly now, clearer than I had in years. I hadn't come back to Ravenshore to heal. I'd come back to finish something.